It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Welcome back. You're live with Expresso. Thank you so much for tuning in. We're going to have a little bit of fun now with Kim, chatting about family matters. And of course, she is a family therapist and registered social worker, Kim Abrams, who I'm sure deals with this a lot in her practice, developing empathy, identifying it, developing it within our children. It has got to be one of the most important skills, survival skills as a grown-up. But I think for a child to have an enjoyable, enriched life. Life is so much better when you can enjoy and empathize and get into those kind of emotional connections with other people. So Kim, first of all, I'm going to ask you in your own words to describe how would you describe empathy to a child and a parent that you're working with?
Okay, so I suppose in essence, I would often say empathy is the ability to understand somebody else's feelings. And for children, we often say it's about putting yourself in someone else's shoes. So how do you think that person is feeling? It's one of my most favorite topics to talk about because it's such a beautiful trait when you actually start seeing it in a child.
For sure.
Yeah, so it's about compassion, it's about kindness, it's about the ability to see someone else's needs and what they are going through. And then on some level, you're actually connecting with that. So it's a very deep level of connection that, makes us different from anything else, like animals and robots and all of that.
I think even for adults, but for a child, it's got to be a brilliant tool to learn about yourself, because you're seeing yourself reflected in others as they are reflected in you. But why is it such an important skill specifically for a child to develop?
So when we're parenting children, we always have to think long term for them. So what type of person what character traits or morals and values do we want to instill in them? And one of the most important things, I think, is that you have a child who's able to build connections with people and to maintain those connections. So children who have the ability to empathize are often ones who have strong friendship groups. They are always the ones really who friends come to when they're having problems. And this is important because as your child grows up, they're going to go out in the big wide world and they need to learn to be able to connect with people, not just in terms of...
That might land them that job.
Absolutely, not just in terms of personal relationships, but friendships and things. Because if you think about it, when somebody connects with you and says, I understand what you're going through, that must be really, really hard. There's something that happens between you and that other person that connects you. So that's one of the most important reasons why we want to instill it.
I'm just seeing layers, it just adds layers to life. Is it there innately? Are we born with empathy? Is it something that has to be activated by a parent? How do you feel?
It's one of those, there's two schools of thought about it. One school of thought is we're not born with it, we have to nurture it and develop it. And another school of thought is that actually some children are born just predisposed to having a personality where they are more open and receptive to empathize. I think the latter is true.
It's a scale, I suppose. Yeah,
absolutely. Children are born with their own personality and we can either nurture that and develop it or actually trump it down and just make it worse for them, really. So it's all in terms of how we're developing it in the home.
Whenever we have these discussions, it's always like you hold up a mirror to my face and I've got to now start considering myself as a human being. And I think that's what parenting generally is about. And I think once you start to become more comfortable in your own skin and embrace these things, it becomes easier to impart those skills. But when should we start actively having a conscious conversation around it and start trying to develop that sense of empathy within our kids?
So there's no set age. There's no set age where we say to parents, by now you should have been starting to teach your child empathy. You actually do it when your child's a baby anyway. So if you think about it, when your child cries out, you go to them.
Trying to figure out.
Yes, you try to figure out what's going on. You're showing empathy. So then a child learns, when I express a need, people come to me and I can trust the world. But what we say is the sooner the better. So with toddlers, it's great. You can actually do really fun activities with them to get them to open up to the world of empathy. And that's mainly through play. So, baby dolls for boys and girls are great ways to, children feed the dolls, they cuddle the dolls, they put the dolls to sleep. That's a really lovely process to enter with a child, to introduce them to empathy. And then there's a host of other things we can do as well, like reading to the child and getting them to think about the character and the plot of the story. So these are all lovely ways that's probably my most favorite way of teaching empathy.
First step, put yourself in your little one's little shoes for just a moment. We're going to continue our discussion with Kim in just a moment. We are talking about empathy and developing that within our kids.
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Welcome back. You're live with Expresso. We're going to continue a very interesting discussion for me, certainly as a parent. Earlier in the show, our therapist and registered social worker, Kim Abrams, explained the importance of helping our children develop the skill of empathy. We're continuing that conversation right now with Kim. And I've got an interesting question here. Is empathy the same as sympathy? What's the difference?
I love this question. So they are vastly different, actually. We often get it confused. So sympathy is really when you're feeling sorry for somebody. You do still want to support them, but you're kind of thinking, oh gosh, you know, that's really, sad that happened to you. When you have empathy, you're saying to the person, I understand and I can relate to what you're saying. Perhaps you've gone through the same experience, or you just are highly sensitive and you're just able to take on board what that person's going through. So there's some key examples in terms of when you'll hear people talk to you. So a sympathy example is, oh, sorry to hear that, you know.
Oh, shame.
Yeah, empathy is, that must be really hard for you. I'm wondering how I can support you.
Okay.
So there's different ways where
So it's
we
almost
experience it.
sympathy would be drifting towards a base emotion, whereas
Yes.
empathy is higher thinking. It
Absolutely,
shows
it's much
the ability
deeper.
to think beyond the apparent. If our child is not showing signs of empathy and we're concerned as a parent, is there a test we can do ourselves, or can we take our child to have an empathy test? How would you go about identifying where they sit on that scale as we've identified?
So this is a tricky one. And parents often ask me, you know, is there a test to do this? Is there a test to do that? There isn't an empathy test. What we do have, though, is we have research going on, scientific research, where different measures are being put in place to measure a child's empathy. But those findings we use to help us to understand child development and how to work with a child. So there isn't really a specific test that you can take your child, you know, to have. But if you are worried that your child is maybe not showing the signs that you'd want to see, perhaps go back and try to implement some strategies that you can teach them to understand empathy. So reading to them, asking them about the character plot, playing with dolls or any of characters that they enjoy doing, and then it's easier to open up.
Yeah, maybe them understanding how you're feeling going through a particular situation. If they can identify, that's obviously going to be a very useful skill as a parent.
Yeah.
One thing I am concerned about, because I'm quite an emotional being, and very often I feel like I take too much on board, and I'm worried that Jack's going to take that on. But it's also awesome to feel and be able to empathise and have that emotional intelligence, that EQ as well.
Yeah.
Is there so much, such a thing as too much empathy?
There is. We often call it compassion fatigue. Where,
I like that, yeah.
Where you go through a phase of just feeling completely stressed and drained out because you're taking on a lot of people's experiences and their feelings. And then then you internalize that, and it's exhausting. So we really advocate, especially for parents, to practice self-care, because I think parents often can over-empathize with their children, and that's often out of love. You don't mean to do it deliberately. It's just you are worried about your child. So practice self-care things just to help you just to connect with who you are and what you enjoy. And then it kind of makes you a bit more refreshed to go back and try to connect with your child or people around you. So just,
And you've got to fill your own cup up from time to time. Any final tips of advice?
Enjoy teaching your child empathy. It's such a beautiful trait to see once your child displays it, and then you really can give yourself a massive pat on the back as a parent. And just keep practicing it, keep enjoying it with them, and use games and books to help them to understand the concept, and it will be much easier.
Well, I can empathise with you right now how much this means to you, this particular conversation, and that kind of feeds into how important it is.
Absolutely.
I think as a parent, not just for your child, but also for yourself to develop that strength. We've had a couple of social comments come through on our social media. Quite a lengthy one coming in from Pomolo, Molly, saying parents need to sit down with their children, have a deep emotional chat with them. Children learn better and understand better by seeing. So sometimes when people go through certain things, you need to support them, and your child can learn from that. Teach them about humanity, about love, why it is important to love everyone and respect everyone regardless. You as a parent need to be humble as well. It's no point in teaching your child about all that by only to find out that you yourself don't practice what you preach.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Really
that's
well
so,
put.
so beautiful. And a really nice way to also encourage your child to talk about their feelings is to use the emojis on your phone.
Oh, cool.
You know, you don't have to get up and go out and buy expensive things. You can start teaching them about feelings just by asking them what you
Yeah,
think
which-
that's showing. Yeah, it's a fun way to teach them.
And also, I think, become a bit more savvy yourself through that process if you're a parent who's feeling like you're on the wrong side of the digital divide. Kim, really, really helpful chat. Thank you
you're
so much. From a
welcome.
parent's perspective, I've
Great.
gleaned some absolute gems out of that. So hopefully we've helped you to empathize with your child a little bit more, but start that journey of teaching them empathy, a vital skill that's going to help them throughout their life.